My son yelled at me for being late to pick up his kid. I was bleeding from a car accident. I shut him up. It wasn't the bleeding knee or the frozen air that hurt most. It was my son's voice when I walked in the door. That morning had started just like any other. I brewed my usual cup of chamomile tea and wrapped Ethan's scarf in the way he hated, but always kept him warm. I even tucked a chocolate chip cookie in my coat pocket for him, just in case he had a hard day. I remember tipping $2 at my usual cafe stop, the one where the radio always played too low to hear clearly. But that day, I caught the forecast. Light snow. Tonight in Kane County, temps dropping to 15 degrees. I should have taken it more seriously. Should have stayed home, but I didn't by 2:30. The sidewalks around Maple Falls Elementary were slick with black ice. I rushed anyway, worn boots, bad knee and all. The moment I hit the patch near the flagpole, I went down. A quick sting, then a deep burn in my leg. I gritted my teeth and pulled myself up before anyone could notice. My pants were torn at the knee, blood seeping through, but Ethan was waiting. He always expected me. He barely looked up when I called his name, just tossed his backpack at me, and walked ahead, like a little boss. I limped behind, the cold slicing through my coat, my scarf too loose. He didn't ask why I was walking slower than usual. At home, I barely had time to shut the door behind me before Matthew's voice cut through the living room like a whip. "You're 10 minutes late." He was standing outside like an orphan. I blinked. That's not okay, Mom," he snapped, tugging his AirPods out like I'd interrupted something sacred. "You have one job." Ethan dropped his shoes at the door and stomped off, yelling something about a dead iPad. Melissa emerged from the hallway, expression tight, not even glancing at my face. "Is dinner going to be ready soon?" I told Ethan. We'd eat early tonight. My leg pulsed beneath the wet fabric. I opened my mouth, then closed it. There was no point. I walked past them, silent, dripping melted snow, onto the hardwood floor. In the bathroom, I peeled off my pants and washed the wound. The gash was angry and red. The blood had dried in strange patterns, like branches. I dabbed on ointment and wrapped a clean bandage around it. The skin around it throbbed with each heartbeat. Upstairs, laughter echoed from Ethan's room. YouTube videos blaring. Downstairs, the hum of the TV filled the space with noise I couldn't decipher. I stood in the hallway a moment longer, listening, then changed into dry clothes and shuffled to the kitchen. No one had bothered to set the table. I boiled a small pot of soup, just enough for one. No one asked what I was cooking. No one asked why I didn't cook for all. I ladled my dinner into a chipped blue bowl and sat at the far end of the table alone, spoon in one hand, cloth napkin in the other. Melissa sat on the couch, scrolling. Matthew tapped something on his laptop. AirPods back in. I wasn't sure if he was working or just pretending not to see me. The only warmth in the house came from the soup, that in the space heater, humming quietly by the sink. Then I heard it, soft but clear enough. "She's becoming more of a burden every day," Matthew muttered. I didn't know if he meant for Melissa to hear it or not. Maybe he didn't even realize he said it aloud. She didn't respond, just nodded, vaguely, eyes still on her screen. I lowered my spoon, slowly, hands trembling. That word, burden, landed heavier than the fall I'd taken earlier. I finished eating, washed my bowl, and dried it with the towel that had faded sunflowers on it, the one Ethan used to like when he was 3. In the quiet that followed, I sat a long while in the kitchen, rubbing circles into the fabric of my pants. I ran my fingers over the bandage and whispered, I wasn't always this invisible. I made Ethan's favorite blueberry pancakes. He asked if we had Pop-Tarts instead. I flipped the last pancake onto the plate, carefully dusting it with powdered sugar, the way he used to love when he was 5. He didn't even look up from the tablet when I placed it in front of him. Do we have any Pop-Tarts? He asked, eyes glued to the screen. I stood there for a second, spatula still in hand. You used to like my pancakes, he shrugged. Pop-Tarts are faster. Melissa breezed into the kitchen a few minutes later, hair curled, makeup fresh. She glanced at the plate and raised an eyebrow, still doing the whole made-from-scratch thing. You know, you can get pancake batter on Instacart now. Takes like half the time. Honestly, you still shop. Like it's 1985. She laughed a little, not unkindly, just distracted. Her phone buzzed, and she was already halfway to the living room before I could answer. I poured myself a cup of coffee, ignoring the ache in my knee. It hadn't stopped throbbing since Tuesday, but I stood. I've been standing through worse for years. The snow was falling softly outside, coating the yard in a gentle hush. The radio by the window crackled, then picked up Nat King Cole's voice, warm and velvety chestnuts roasting on an open fire. I used to hum along to that song when Carl was alive. He hated Christmas music, but he let me play it anyway. I finished my coffee and decided to head downstairs. Melissa had mentioned the holiday plates yesterday. They were somewhere in the basement. I was sure of it. Maybe digging around would warm me up a little. The air downstairs was colder, musty with the scent of cardboard and cedar. I passed old moving boxes, a yellowed baby swing, a cracked vase. I kept meaning to glue. The holiday plates were tucked behind a stack of tins. I reached for them, and that's when I saw it. The corner of a tin box, pale green, with faded pink roses. My heart paused. The recipe box. I hadn't opened it in years. The latch creaked as I lifted the lid. Dozens of index cards sat there, worn with time. My handwriting, my mother's even a few, in Carl's blocky script. My fingers brushed over the familiar titles. Apple crumble, baked, mac and cheese, the strawberry jam cake. Ethan never liked, but I made every Christmas anyway. Then I found it. A yellowing note tucked behind a recipe for lemon bars. The ink was faint, but I didn't need to read it. I knew every word. Thanks for keeping me alive, Carl. It was written after his first heart surgery, when I'd stayed up for weeks straight, cooking bland, boring meals for him, measuring his sodium, hiding the salt shaker, nagging him to take his meds. He called me a nag. Then, one night, he slipped that note into the recipe box. Said nothing, just let me find it. He never said those words out loud. I pressed the paper between my hands. It was soft, from age, almost fragile, like something sacred. I sat down on the basement step, the tin in my lap, and wept quietly. The kind of crying that doesn't shake your shoulders or echo through a house, just salt and memory later. I carried the tin upstairs and stepped out onto the porch. The snow had slowed, leaving a fresh, white sheet over Maple Falls. I sat on the bench box, still in my lap, and let the cold numb my hands. Morning, Helen, a voice called. Nancy stood at the edge of her walk, clutching a mason jar, wrapped in a dish towel. Thought you might want some peach preserves, she said. Made them last week. I wiped my face quickly and smiled. That's sweet of you. She stepped up, eyeing the box on my lap. That, your old recipe box. I nodded. Just feeling the cold today. I lied. Nancy didn't push. She just sat beside me for a minute. Jar warm between us. The door creaked open behind me. Helen, Melissa called. Can you pick Ethan up early on Monday? I've got a nail appointment. At 4. I didn't turn, just nodded barely. After a moment, I opened the lid again and found the note. I folded it slowly, deliberately, and whispered. Even Carl noticed once. They never do. Nancy stood, pulling her scarf tighter. She took a few steps, then turned back. You know, you can talk to me anytime. It wasn't the shirt. It was the way he yelled, like I was nobody. The house buzzed with noise. That morning, pots, clattering drawers, slamming Ethan's screeching cartoons, still playing upstairs. Even though he was supposed to be getting dressed, the sky outside was pale and cold, the kind of white-blue that always made my joints ache. The annual tree lighting ceremony was at 4. Ethan's class was singing Jingle Bell Rock. He was excited, or had been, until the moment I made a mistake. I had forgotten to iron his choir shirt. It had always been ready before, folded, hung, pressed to perfection. But this morning, somewhere between the cinnamon rolls and Melissa's non-fat latte request, it slipped my mind. Just one small thing, Matthew's voice exploded from the hallway. Where's the damn shirt? I flinched. My hands were wrist-deep in a bowl of batter. It's in the laundry room. I meant to. You meant to. His footsteps pounded toward me, fast and sharp. Jesus, Mom. You meant to. He held the wrinkled white shirt in one hand, waving it like a flag of war. Ethan stood behind him, pouting, arms crossed. You ruin everything, Ethan said, not yelling, just flat. I froze. Melissa appeared next, arms folded neatly. You said you had it. Helen, I couldn't look at any of them. I walked into the kitchen. My hands were shaking. I turned off the oven. The cinnamon rolls, half-baked. The smell of them, sweet, unfinished, only made me feel more sick. Matthew kept muttering as he left the room. Unbelievable. I leaned against the counter, pressing both palms flat to the cool tile. From across the street, Nancy stood on her porch, pretending to water a plant that had long since frozen. I saw her phone in her other hand. She wasn't trying to hide it. I didn't know whether to feel embarrassed or grateful. I stayed in the kitchen until the shouting faded into doors slamming and Melissa's heels clicking down the hall. The house felt colder than it should have. The heating was fine, but something in the walls, something between us was broken after they left. I climbed the stairs and walked slowly to my room. I opened the closet and pulled down my old Navy suitcase, the one I used when Carl and I drove to the Smoky Mountains in '92. The zipper still stuck on one corner. I packed 2 changes of clothes and a worn photo of Carl and me taken at a 4th of July picnic decades ago. His smile was crooked. My hair was too big. We looked like strangers now. I stood in the hallway and looked around at the family photos that didn't include me, the wall hooks never used for my coat, the silence that had always followed my footsteps. Then I spoke. You want so much from me, but never once asked how I was doing. My voice didn't tremble. It was low, calm, like I was stating a fact. That afternoon, I stood at the back of the park, watching Ethan sing. He missed a few words in the second verse, fidgeted with his sleeves. I saw it, but I didn't comment. I clutched the suitcase, handle tighter. When I returned home, the porch light was on. I climbed the steps slowly, legs sore. The suitcase thumped softly behind me. Then came the knock. Nancy stood at the foot of the porch, wrapped in a thick brown coat, cheeks pink from the cold. She looked up at me, her eyes steady. You don't have to do this alone. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I left a letter, then quietly froze their future. The sun hadn't fully risen when I slipped out of bed. The house was still steeped in that fragile silence, only found before dawn. I moved slowly, careful not to wake anyone. Even the floorboards seemed to cooperate, for once creaking softly beneath my slippers, as if urging me forward. In the kitchen, I lit the small lamp above the sink. The glow barely reached the table. I sat down, folded my hands for a moment, then opened the drawer where I kept stationery that hadn't seen light in years. I didn't list grievances. I didn't vent. I just wrote questions. Did you ever see me? Did it ever matter when I smiled or cried or bled? Did you know I used to dance in the kitchen when no one was home? I didn't sign love, mom. I just signed mom. Upstairs, I could hear the faint hum of Matthew's sound machine. Ocean waves crashing over my worn-out nerves. Melissa's perfume bottle clinked against the vanity. Their world, still moving, without pause, unaware. By 7:15, I had showered, dressed, and pulled on my old wool coat. Outside, frost webbed the windshield of Nancy's Subaru, already warming in the driveway. She'd said she'd be here before sunrise. She was. Before I left, I took a final look around the kitchen. The fridge still dotted with Ethan's spelling tests. The coffee pot already prepared the night before. My doing as always, I folded the letter in thirds, placed it in the center of the table, and weighed it down with a coaster that read, "Home is where your story begins." Then I picked up my recipe box and slipped it into my bag. It felt heavier than usual. Nancy handed me a travel mug as I climbed into the passenger seat. "Cinnamon tea," she said. "Thought you might want something warm." I managed a quiet thank you. The mug warmed my palms, but not yet my chest, at the bank. Mr. Howard greeted me with a kindness I hadn't felt in a long time. "Mrs. Langley," he said, peering at me over his readers. "You always handled everything. For Carl, didn't you?" I nodded. Yes. He never liked paperwork. He smiled. The kind you give someone when you remember more than you're saying. I remember. It didn't take long. I explained that I wanted to freeze the joint account. Carl had left me, the one I discovered Matthew had been dipping into the past year. Mr. Howard didn't ask questions, just handed me a pen and a clipboard. When we walked out, the frost had melted from the sidewalks, but I still felt cold. We drove in silence. At a red light, Nancy asked, "You okay?" I nodded. It was all I could give. In my lap, I clutched the recipe box, like it was a life preserver, I whispered. "I hope they read it. But it's not for them, it's for me." Meanwhile, back in the house, the sun was fully up. Matthew burst through the door, coat still on, muttering about needing breakfast before his meeting. He called out once, twice, then louder, "Mom!" No answer. Melissa entered the kitchen, holding her phone. "She's probably folding laundry or something." She stopped. The letter lay untouched on the table. Before she could read it, the phone rang. Matthew grabbed it. His face twisted as he listened. "Wait, what? The account's frozen." His voice dropped. "She froze it." Melissa finally looked at the letter. She read the first line, then the second. Her fingers trembled. She looked up. "She's gone." She actually left. The house was smaller. The heater rattled, but the silence was finally kind. It took a week for my ears to adjust. I didn't realize how loud my old life had been until I woke up in this cottage. No Ethan shouting for cereal. No Matthew pacing during phone calls. No Melissa asking if I'd picked up the wrong brand again. Just the soft tick of a wall clock and the occasional chirp of birds that hadn't flown south yet. Nancy's late sister had left the place almost untouched. A floral quilt on the bed, yellowed curtains that glowed in morning sun. The heater clanked like it was coughing through its final years. But it worked. That was enough. We spent the first few days scrubbing down the kitchen. Nancy sang along to the radio. Old Carpenters. Sometimes Simon and Garfunkel. She said baking would warm the place up. I didn't tell her I'd already planned to. I used to bake to fill time. Now I baked because it brought me back to life. Cinnamon rolls first, then an apple pie with a crust that flaked like memory. The smell drifted out the cracked window. A dog barked down the lane. Nancy peeked in and grinned, cheeks smudged with flour. "You've still got it," she said. By Saturday, we had a folding table and a slot at the weekend farmers market, nestled between a booth selling hand-knitted scarves and another ladling out butternut squash soup. I was nervous. My hands trembled slightly as I laid out the baskets, but the first customer smiled, then came back the next week with friends. One of them was Mr. Hank. He walked with a cane, wore a brown bomber jacket, and a cap that said, "Ooh, veteran." His eyes were clear blue, sharp, with memory. After his first bite of cinnamon roll, he looked at me, tilted his head, and said, "This tastes like 1947. I smiled, not sure if it was a compliment. He came every Saturday after that, always bought 2 rolls, said one was for the road, the other was for his wife, who passed in 2008. "I eat hers, for her now," he said. "She used to make pies, too, but never had the nerve to sell them. I didn't say much in return, just wrapped the rolls carefully and handed them over with a nod." Nancy handled most of the logistics, taking orders on an old tablet she'd unearthed from a drawer. I called it a magic slate, this touchscreen thing. "It's witchcraft," I said, tapping it cautiously. Nancy nearly dropped her coffee, laughing. We kept our rhythm. Mornings were for baking, afternoons for walking. The trail behind the cottage. Maple trees stood bare, but noble, like silent guards. In the evenings, we sat by the window with tea, sometimes saying nothing at all. One evening, I checked the tablet and noticed I had a new voicemail. I expected it to be from the market coordinator, but it was Ethan. His voice was soft, scratchy. "Grandma, I miss you. Mommy says you're busy. I told her your pancakes are better than Pop-Tarts. I don't care if they're burnt. I hope you come home." I didn't cry, but my chest felt like it had been knocked from the inside. Later that night, as Nancy dried the last dish, she said, almost offhandedly, "My son hasn't called in 3 years. Guess we raised them too well, huh?" We both laughed, but the sound faded too quickly. In the quiet, I whispered to myself, I used to make pancakes no one wanted. Now, strangers line up for my bread. Nancy walked in from the other room with something folded in her hand. She sat down, unfolded it, and slid it across the table. "There's a spring fair next month," she said, tapping the flyer. "You ready to go public?" He knocked, like it was still his house. But this time, I didn't answer right away. I stood at the kitchen counter, tying the last ribbon around a breadbasket. Outside the cottage window, spring flags fluttered above booths, and the faint sound of church bells drifted through the morning air. The heater had stopped rattling days ago. Or maybe I'd stopped noticing 3 months ago. I left with 2 changes of clothes. Today, I wore my favorite blouse, the floral one with sleeves that fluttered just a bit in the breeze. I used to save it for Sundays, for when Carl still cared what I wore. He said it was too cheerful. I wore it anyway. Nancy peeked in from the porch, balancing a tray of cinnamon rolls. "You ready?" she asked. Before I could answer, the knock came again, louder this time, familiar. I walked slowly to the door, My hand rested on the knob. I took a breath, then opened it. Matthew stood there, hair unkempt, tie askew, Melissa behind him, pale and tired looking, holding Ethan's hand. Or maybe he was holding hers. His eyes flicked up at me, then down again. "Hi, Mom," Matthew said. We didn't know where else to go. I waited. He shifted. "Ethan, he talks about you all the time. Keeps asking if you'll make pancakes again." Ethan peeked around Melissa's legs. I said, "Sorry." He mumbled, eyes shiny. Melissa said nothing. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. The sun felt warm on my back. "I loved you all," I said slowly. "I still do, but I won't live unloved anymore." No one spoke. Melissa looked away. Matthew nodded more to himself than to me. They turned. Ethan paused, gave a little wave, then climbed into the back seat. I didn't cry. Inside the kitchen smelled like nutmeg and lemon glaze. Nancy placed a slip of paper on the shelf. It was the transcript of the audio clip she'd saved, framed now in simple wood. "Our freedom started there," she said softly. I nodded. "At the fair. People lined up early. Kids ran with cotton candy. Someone played folk guitar near the fountain. We sold out of cinnamon rolls by 10. Just before noon, a woman with streaks of silver in her hair approached the booth. She held a loaf of honey wheat like it was something sacred. "I watched your video," she said. "The one where you spoke at the community center last month. Your strength helped me leave too." I didn't know what to say, so I just placed my hand over hers for a moment. That was enough. Later, as I packed up the baskets, I caught sight of Matthew's car pulling away in the distance. Ethan was in the back seat, his small face pressed to the window. He waved. I waved back. Then I turned to Nancy, who was tucking the last cash envelope into her purse. "Let's bake something new tomorrow," I said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't beg to be seen. She simply walked away. And for the first time in years, every step felt like hers. Some people spend a lifetime giving thinking. It's the same as being loved. But when love forgets to say thank you, even the warmest heart begins to freeze, like an old quilt once wrapped around a family's winter. She was set aside when spring came, until she remembered her own warmth. So, if this story has touched something quiet in you, maybe it's time to check who you've stopped hearing or who's stopped hearing you.